Everyone knows that I'm going to become a war correspondent. Everyone, except my girlfriend of 5 years. That's because right now, all she can see is the Prince Charming who has just returned from abroad. She's so absorbed in him that even when I caught the two of them meeting in private, her explanation was still painfully weak. Baby, I don't want to lie to you, but the moment I saw him, my mind was still in turmoil. I don't know whether that feeling was my heart racing, or just an obsession with the past. I never thought about breaking up with you. I just can't sort out my feelings right now. Can you give me 1 month? Just 1 month. So I can really figure things out. What she didn't expect was that I nodded and agreed without the slightest hesitation. What I didn't say out loud was this: no need to wait a month. You've been dumped. Congratulations. May you two stay stuck together for life. Chapter 1. I worked hard for 7 years, and at last the promotion assessment for chief reporter at the TV station arrived. Yet just then, someone parachuted in from above, Makoto, with a dazzling resume. The station director announced, whoever secured the exclusive interview with Willow, the heir to a top-tier elite family, would get the position. I laughed on the spot. Willow was my girlfriend. She loved me deeply. For me, this interview would be effortless. But later, when the list was released, the person Willow chose to give the exclusive interview to was Makoto. I froze where I stood, unable to believe it. I rushed to the restaurant she often went to, wanting to ask her face to face and get a clear answer. But through the glass, I saw her slightly lowering her head, focused and gentle, carefully peeling shrimp for Makoto. At that moment, it felt like a bolt of lightning struck me. I clearly remembered that a year ago, it was also in this very restaurant, I had jokingly asked her to peel shrimp for me. She had smiled softly, kissed my fingertips, and said, "Husband, I'm allergic to shrimp. I can't peel them. Do it yourself." Okay. I stood there, staring blankly at the scene inside the restaurant, feeling as though invisible ice spikes had pierced straight through my body, leaving me unable to move. Everyone said Willow was a famous high-end mighty ice queen in our circle, aloof, restrained, so intimidating that no man dared approach her. Only in front of me, her boyfriend, would she shed that cold exterior and show rare tenderness. But now, for the first time, I saw an even gentler expression on her face, and it wasn't for me. I felt as though my entire world was collapsing and shattering before my eyes. It wasn't until Makoto stood up and headed for the restroom that I finally seemed to regain control of my body. I walked over step by step, my steps unsteady, as if I were walking on clouds, or treading on shattered glass. Willow. My voice was unbearably hoarse, trembling beyond my control. She looked up at the sound. When she saw it was me, she clearly froze for a moment. A trace of panic flashed through her eyes. Hard to notice, but it was quickly covered by her usual composure. "George, why are you here? What exactly is your relationship with Makoto?" I stared at her, every word squeezed out through clenched teeth. Willow was silent for a few seconds. She put down her gloves, pulled out a napkin, and slowly wiped her hands, avoiding my gaze. She said softly, "George, do you remember the emotional history I told you about before?" My whole body trembled. Of course I remembered. Not long after we started dating, I noticed how well she knew how to please men, and I couldn't help asking whether she'd had many boyfriends before. Back then, she leaned against my chest and told me honestly, "Not many. I only chased one. It was back in high school. I was far less steady than I am now. I had just fallen for someone for the first time, and I used all my energy to pursue him, studying everything he liked. That's why I know so much." She said it lightly, as if she were telling someone else's story. In the end, I didn't succeed, not because he was unwilling, but because he went abroad to pursue his dreams. I had to stay in the country to inherit the family business, so we missed each other. Her expression had been too calm back then, so I assumed she had long since let it go. After all, so many years had passed, and after all, she had never even officially been with him. After all, I was the one who had spent 5 years by her side. 5 years ago, at a business gala, I met Willow for the first time. She was already a powerful, commanding force, a blazing rose dominating the scene, while I was just a rookie reporter fresh out of school. She stood at the center of the crowd, as if surrounded by her own aura, impossible to look away from. What I never expected was that after the gala ended, she took the initiative to ask for my contact information, and then began pursuing me. Someone Southwest untouchable would drive several streets on a freezing winter night just to buy the drink I liked, would quietly wait downstairs when I worked late into the night, would drop everything and stay by my side without leaving when I fell ill. I once asked her why she chose me. She had only gently kissed my chin and said, "Because you are you." Now that I think about it, perhaps it was only because I happened to appear during the gap in her heart. That person is Makoto, isn't it? My voice shook violently. Willow let out a soft mm. "Then what do you feel for him now?" I heard myself ask, my voice trembling. After a moment of silence, Willow spoke in a low voice. "George, I don't want to lie to you. The moment I saw him, My heart was still unsettled, but I'm not sure whether that's love rekindled, or just an obsession with the past. She looked at me, her gaze complicated. I've never thought about breaking up with you, but right now, I can't sort out my feelings. Can you give me 1 month, just 1 month, to let me figure things out properly? It felt as though an invisible hand was gripping my heart tightly, squeezing until I could barely breathe. Not only had my chance at promotion been handed away by her own hands, now she was saying something like this to me. For the past 5 years, she had treated me so well. Everyone who had seen us together said that Willow loved me deeply. So why was it that Makoto's mere reappearance was enough to change everything? If her heart was never truly empty, then why did she come and entangle me in the first place? Just as I was about to speak, Makoto came back from the restroom. When he saw me, he was clearly taken aback for a moment, then quickly put on a polite smile. "Reporter Wong, what are you doing here?" Before I could say anything, Willow had already stood up and introduced me naturally. "Makoto, this is George Wong, my boyfriend." Makoto froze briefly, then smiled. "I've heard for a long time that Willow has a boyfriend she loves very much. I didn't expect it to be Reporter Wong. What a coincidence." He then turned to me, his tone sincere. "Reporter Wong, please don't misunderstand. Willow and I are just old friends catching up. Since you're here too, why don't we eat together?" I could only be pulled into sitting down like a puppet, yet throughout the meal, I could barely taste a thing. I watched helplessly as almost all of Willow's attention was on Makoto, carefully serving him food, responding to every topic he brought up, her thoughtfulness exceeding even how she treated me. Every scene was like a knife, stabbing viciously into my heart. I couldn't bear to watch any longer. Just as I was about to stand up and leave, the unexpected happened. A piercing screech of brakes sounded from outside. A car that had lost control smashed through the guardrail and hurtled straight toward the floor-to-ceiling window where we were sitting. "Watch out." Willow's face changed instantly as she sprang to her feet. In that split second, I saw her act almost purely on instinct, without the slightest hesitation. She leapt past me, who was sitting right beside her, and tightly pulled Makoto, who was seated diagonally across, into her arms, throwing herself to the side with him. Bang! Crash! The deafening impact and the sound of shattering glass rang out. I didn't even have time to react. I only felt a massive force slam into me as flying shards of glass sliced into my skin like knives. Immediately after, an entire shattered window frame crashed brutally onto my back and head. Blinding pain swallowed all my consciousness in an instant. The last image before everything went black was Willow holding Makoto tightly, her back to me, shielding him completely. When I woke up again, I was in a hospital room reeking of disinfectant. My whole body felt as if it had been torn apart and put back together, especially my head and back. I struggled to move my eyes. The room was empty, there was no one there but me. A nurse came in to change my dressing. Seeing that I was awake, she let out a sigh of relief. "Mr. Wong, you're awake. Your injuries are quite serious: concussion, multiple cuts from glass on your back, and minor bone fractures. You need plenty of rest. We should notify a family member to come take care of you." I looked at the empty room and said softly, "I don't have any family." The nurse sighed, hesitated as if she wanted to say something, then left. The door wasn't fully closed. From the hallway came faint sounds of nurses chatting. Sigh. People really do have different fates. That Mr. Ito in the VIP ward, he just has a small cut on his hand. And Miss Liu is so nervous she's hovering over him nonstop. The doctor already said he's fine, but she still won't relax. And then look at this Mr. Wong, hurt this badly. Almost didn't wake up. And it's been a whole day and night. Not a single family member has come to visit. Their words were like poison-tipped needles, stabbing one after another into my already battered heart. So that's how it was. So she hadn't come because she was staying with Makoto Ito, the one she had protected so thoroughly, who'd only ended up with a tiny cut. I suddenly let out a low laugh. I laughed and laughed, but tears poured out uncontrollably, soaking the pillow. 1 month, for her to sort out her feelings. How ridiculous. There was no need for a month at all. In just a few hours, with one instinctive choice at the moment of life and death, everything had already been made crystal clear, who she truly held in her heart. Fine. Since she had never truly let go of Makoto, then I would grant her wish. I would set her free, let her reunite with the unresolved longing of her youth, and rekindle that old flame. I took a deep breath, wiped away my tears, reached for my phone with my still functional right hand, and dialed the number of a station executive. "Sir, I'm applying for a transfer to the Middle East war zone to work as a war correspondent." Chapter 2. The leader on the other end of the line was utterly shocked. "George, have you lost your mind? Is this because of the promotion? Don't be impulsive. Do you have any idea how dangerous it is over there? Bullets don't have eyes." "I'm not being impulsive." My voice was unnaturally calm. Being a war correspondent is one of the highest ideals for any journalist. Walking through gunfire and reporting the raw truth from the front lines, that was my original aspiration when I entered this profession. Before, I had ties holding me back, so I buried the dream deep in my heart. Now, there's nothing left to hold me. George, have you really thought this through? I have. The leader was silent for a long time. Finally, he let out a heavy sigh. In that case, I approve it. Get your visa and related procedures in order and head out when you're ready. During this time, you don't need to come back to the station. Thank you, sir. Just as I hung up, the hospital room door was pushed open. Willow walked in, a trace of urgency and barely concealed fatigue on her face. She came to my bedside, frowned slightly, and asked, "Who were you talking to just now?" I lowered my lashes, not wanting to look at her. The station leadership, reporting work. Seeing my indifferent attitude, Willow pressed her lips together and sat down beside me. "George, about what happened yesterday. I'm really sorry. Everything happened too fast. I just instinctively protected the one who was closest to me at the time. It felt like my heart was stabbed viciously once again. The one closest to her. I was clearly closer. She had been sitting between Makoto and me. I was right at her side, within arm's reach. Yet the one she chose to protect was Makoto, whom she had to deliberately reach past me to grab. I said nothing. I simply closed my eyes, locking all the pain and despair tightly behind them. Over the next few days, Willow stayed in the hospital room to take care of me, but her mind was never fully there. She checked her phone frequently, and whenever she received updates from her assistant about Makoto's condition, her tone would unconsciously turn tense and concerned. I couldn't stand it anymore and said hoarsely, "You should go take care of Mr. Ito. I have nurses here." Willow shook her head, her tone firm. "He was just frightened and has a few minor cuts. You're seriously injured. I should stay here with you." I wanted to laugh until tears came out. Her body was here, but where was her heart? It had long since flown to Makoto's hospital room. What was the point of staying like this, forced and half-hearted? On the day I was discharged, at the hospital entrance, I happened to run into Makoto, who was being discharged as well. Makoto greeted us warmly, first asking with concern about my injuries. Then he took 2 exquisitely designed invitations out of his bag and handed one each to Willow and me. "The station is holding a promotion celebration dinner for me tomorrow night. Willow, George, you must come and honor us with your presence." I didn't take it. The smile on Makoto's face immediately turned a little strained. "George, are you still angry with me because I took your interview opportunity? I really didn't know you and Willow were in this kind of relationship. If I'd known earlier, I definitely wouldn't have accepted the assignment." Anne. I truly didn't expect Willow to choose to accept my interview either. Yes, who could have expected it? Between her official boyfriend and someone else, she chose someone else. It felt like my chest was being struck again and again by a blunt weapon, the pain so deep it was almost numb. Just as I was about to speak, Willow had already calmly taken the invitation, giving Makoto a reassuring look. "This has nothing to do with you. Don't overthink it. George isn't that petty. Don't worry, we'll be there." To spare Makoto any embarrassment, she had already made the decision for me. My heart clenched painfully, but I said nothing. Over the next few days, I watched helplessly as Willow prepared earnestly for Makoto's celebration dinner. In front of the full-length mirror in the walk-in closet, she tried on one haute couture gown after another, meticulously matching jewelry and scarves. That level of solemn care, it felt less like attending an ordinary dinner and more like going to receive a supreme honor. She even brought in more than a dozen dazzling watches and cufflinks, spreading them all over the bed, and asked me to help choose. At first, I thought they were for me. I didn't even like such flashy things and was about to refuse when I heard her say, "Which set do you think Makoto would like?" In that instant, I felt as though all the blood in my body had turned ice cold. So this was it. Even when it came to gifts, she put in such painstaking thought, afraid he might not like them. My heart ached sharply, but I said nothing. I simply helped her choose in silence, and that very day, without telling her, I went and quietly applied for my visa. Chapter 3. On the night of the celebration dinner, Willow attended with me. As the main figure of the evening, Makoto was in high spirits, smoothly socializing among the guests. When he saw us, he came over openly to greet us. After exchanging a few polite words, he went off to attend to others, leaving us to ourselves. Although Willow stood beside me the entire time, her attention, her gaze, never once left the figure not far away. Whenever she saw Makoto chatting and laughing with unfamiliar women, the hand holding her wine glass would suddenly tighten, her knuckles turning white, and the wine in her glass would be drained one glass after another. I watched quietly. The barren wasteland in my chest was left with nothing but icy numbness. 5 years. In all that time, I had never seen Willow so out of control, so visibly emotionally stirred by a man. Suddenly, Willow slammed her wine glass heavily onto a waiter's tray with a crisp clink, then strode decisively in one direction. Instinctively, I followed her line of sight. I saw Makoto looking unwell, half supported and half dragged by a somewhat unfamiliar woman toward the elevator outside the banquet hall. My heart tightened, and I followed after them. The lighting on the terrace was dim. I saw Willow grab the woman's arm and deliver a fierce slap across her face. The movement was ruthless, completely devoid of Willow's usual calm restraint. You dared to drug him. Like a beast whose reverse scale had been touched, she slammed the woman to the ground, her slaps raining down like a storm, every strike filled with force. Willow, stop. Willow, I'm fine. Makoto seemed to be jolted awake in fright and rushed over to pull her back. Only then did Willow stop, breathing hard. She flung aside the woman, now disheveled and wailing, pulled out her phone, and called her assistant, her voice icy and terrifying. Come to the elevator lobby. Throw this person out. Find out which family she belongs to. From now on, I don't want to see her anywhere in a city again. It wasn't until the assistant dragged the crying woman away that Willow suddenly turned back and anxiously grabbed Makoto by the shoulders, checking him from head to toe. How are you? Are you hurt? Do you feel unwell anywhere? Makoto leaned against her shoulder, his voice weak. I'm fine. I just thought it'd be livelier with more people, so I let a friend bring friends too. I never expected something like this. Willow, thank goodness you came in time. Otherwise, even if I had a mouth, I wouldn't have been able to explain myself. Willow supported him tightly, her voice softer than it had ever been, tinged with lingering fear. Don't worry, I'm here. I'll never let anyone hurt you. She helped Makoto up and said gently, you've been drugged. I'll take you to the lounge to rest. When she turned around, her eyes met mine, standing at the entrance of the elevator lobby, my face deathly pale. A flash of awkwardness crossed Willow's face. She opened her mouth, wanting to explain. George, no need to explain. I cut her off, my voice so calm it carried not a ripple. I know everything. Go take care of Mr. Ito. Seeing my unnaturally calm expression, a strong sense of unease surged up in Willow's heart for no reason. The old me, if I so much as saw her get a little close to another man, would explode with jealousy and need a long time of coaxing. Back then, though helpless, she would always patiently placate me. With my status, there will always be clueless people sticking to me, but there's only ever been you in my eyes. Don't be jealous for no reason. And I would hold her tightly in my arms, muttering softly, I'm jealous because I love you. The day I stop being jealous, that's when it'll really be dangerous. At that thought, an inexplicable wave of unease suddenly rose in Willow's heart. Chapter 4. She still wanted to say something, but beside her, Makoto let out an uncomfortable groan, rubbing his temples. Willow, my head really hurts. Willow looked at the weak and helpless Makoto in her arms, then at me standing before her with an indifferent expression. In the end, her concern for Makoto won out. She pressed her lips together and said to me, Makoto isn't feeling well. I'll take him to rest first. Can you go back on your own? After saying that, she didn't even wait for my answer. Supporting Makoto, she brushed past me and hurried away. I stood there, the night wind blowing through me, leaving my whole body chilled to the bone. I didn't know how long I stood there. Only when the sharp pain in my heart slowly dulled into numbness did I finally turn around and leave this suffocating place, step by step. Just as I walked out of the hotel's glittering, extravagant entrance and reached the roadside, before I could even take a deep breath of the cold night air, a terrified scream suddenly rang out above my head. Someone jumped off the building. Instinctively, I looked up, only to see a dark shadow rapidly enlarging as it came crashing down toward me. Bang! A tremendous impact struck from above, and excruciating pain instantly swept through every nerve in my body. I didn't even have time to make a sound. My vision went black, and I completely lost consciousness. When I regained awareness, it was the blinding surgical lights and the intense pain racking my body that woke me. I realized I was lying on an operating table, surrounded by doctors and nurses dressed in green surgical gowns. The patient's awake. He's still conscious, a doctor shouted. Then he bent down and spoke rapidly. Mr. Wong, you were struck by a falling object from a height. You have a skull fracture and intracranial bleeding. We must perform a craniotomy immediately. The risk is very high. We need a family member to sign the consent. Quickly, notify your family. Family. I struggled to move my eyes. My vision was blurry. My right hand could still move, but it was sticky with blood. Using every bit of strength I had left, I shakily reached for the phone placed on a tray beside me. The screen was already stained red with blood. Relying on memory and my blurred vision, I dialed the pinned number at the top. The phone rang for a long time before it was answered. Willow's voice came through, carrying impatience and the fatigue of being disturbed. Hello, George, what now? Didn't I tell you to go back on your own? Willow, my voice was so weak it was barely audible. I'm at the hospital, surgery. I need a signature. There was a brief silence on the other end, followed by her impatient sigh. George, stop fooling around. You're the one who told me to take care of Makoto, and now you're calling me back with this. Don't you think that's contradictory? My heart sank violently. Before I could explain, The doctor beside me could no longer stand it. He grabbed the phone and said sternly, "Ma'am, we are doctors from the emergency department of City First Hospital. Mr. George Wang is in critical condition with severe cranial injuries. He must undergo surgery immediately. Please come over right now to sign the consent." There was a brief pause on the line. Then Willow's voice returned, even more impatient, putting on a show and even hiring an accomplice. "George, I really don't have time to play along with this boring act of yours." At that moment, Makoto's voice faintly came through the phone. "Willow, what's wrong? Did something happen to George? Should you go take a look?" Willow immediately softened her tone. "No need. He's always used these tricks, pretending to be sick or pitiful, whenever I have the slightest contact with another man, just to throw a tantrum and call me back. This is just the same old routine. You're unwell and need someone by your side. I have to stay here and take care of you." After that, without waiting for the doctor to say another word, the call was abruptly hung up. The cold, monotonous busy tone was like a sharp blade, completely piercing through my last faint shred of hope. Overwhelming grief and despair engulfed me, yet I didn't even have the strength to cry. I looked at the doctor with great difficulty, my voice barely a whisper. "Doctor, if there's no family member to sign, can I sign it myself?" The chief surgeon looked at this man before him, covered in blood, barely clinging to life, yet treated with such cruelty by the person he loved. His eyes were filled with pity. After a few seconds of silence, he nodded firmly. "All right, we'll perform the surgery. You sign." The nurse handed the surgical risk consent form and a pen to my trembling, blood-stained hand. Using the very last bit of strength I had, I shakily signed my own name, George. Every stroke felt like I was personally burying all 5 years of love and youth. The doctor took the consent form, his voice heavy. "Kid, a girlfriend like that, who doesn't show up when your life is on the line, you don't need her." My unfocused gaze stared up at the blinding light above. The corners of my mouth slowly, painfully curved into a smile uglier than crying, as I whispered, almost inaudibly, "Thank you, doctor. I never planned to keep her anyway." Chapter 5. The anesthetic was pushed into my vein, the icy liquid rapidly spreading through my entire body. In the final second before my consciousness sank into darkness, countless images flashed through my mind at lightning speed. The flutter of my heart when I first met her, the passion with which she pursued me, the sweetness and indulgence after we got together, her celebrating my birthday, cooking for me, walking with me down long streets in the rain. So it turned out that these 5 years of memories I had treasured so dearly couldn't even compare to Makoto's single reappearance before her. A cold tear slipped silently from the corner of my eye and disappeared into my hairline. When I struggled awake from the heavy haze once more, the first thing I saw was Willow sitting beside my hospital bed, her brows tightly furrowed. The moment she saw my eyes open, she leaned in at once. There was still lingering shock in her eyes, along with unmistakable guilt. Her voice was much lower and hoarser than usual. "George, you're awake. I'm sorry. I really didn't expect that call to be real, and I never imagined you'd be hurt this badly. I thought, I wish it had been fake too." I interrupted her. My voice was weak, yet carried an icy calm. "That way, I wouldn't have heard the things you said." Willow's expression shifted slightly, as if my bluntness had pricked her. She pressed her fingers to her brow, trying to explain, her tone carrying the familiar, habitual placation, as if I were merely throwing a tantrum. "George, Makoto was drunk at the time and badly shaken. He couldn't be left alone. When you suddenly called saying you were injured, I naturally thought you were just jealous and trying to pull me away on purpose. I promise you, this won't happen again. I'll believe you in the future." "Okay. Promise." "In the future?" I felt as though my heart had been plunged into icy water, tightening painfully wave after wave. I closed my eyes and said softly, "There is no future." "What did you say?" Willow hadn't heard clearly, or rather, she had never expected me to say something like that. I shook my head and said nothing more. All my strength seemed to have been drained by that surgery, and by those words just now. Over the next few days, Willow stayed at the hospital to take care of me, but it felt more like she was completing a task. Her body was in the ward, yet her mind was clearly elsewhere, until that afternoon, when Makoto appeared at the doorway carrying a fruit basket. "Willow, George, am I disturbing you?" His voice was gentle, with just the right touch of apology. Willow almost immediately stood up from her chair, a smile blooming across her face, one I hadn't seen in a very long time. "Makoto, why are you here? You're not fully recovered yet. You should be resting more." "I'm fine now. I heard George was hurt, so I came to take a look," Makoto said with a smile as he walked in. The next few hours were nothing short of a slow execution for me. All of Willow's attention was focused on Makoto. She carefully peeled an apple for him, cut it into small pieces, stuck toothpicks into them, and handed them to him. She chatted with him about amusing stories from his years abroad, her laughter light and joyful, lighter than I had ever heard. She even noticed Makoto subconsciously rubbing his arms and immediately stood up, without a second thought, to turn off the air conditioning in the room. It was the height of summer. The moment the AC was turned off, stifling heat flooded the ward. The severe wounds on my back were quickly soaked through with sweat. A needle-like pain flared up, sticky and unbearable. I could even feel warm liquid slowly seeping out, staining the hospital gown red. I struggled to part my lips, wanting to say something, only to realize the two of them were chatting happily, completely oblivious to my discomfort. I was like a transparent, unnecessary piece of furniture. After several hours, Makoto finally stood up to leave. Willow instinctively moved to walk him downstairs. "No need to see me off, Willow," Makoto said considerately, his gaze sweeping over my deathly pale face on the bed. "Take good care of George." Only then did Willow stop. Yet her eyes continued to follow Makoto's retreating figure until it disappeared at the end of the corridor, before she reluctantly looked away. At that moment, a nurse came in to change my dressing. The instant she lifted my hospital gown, she gasped sharply, "Oh my God, what happened? Why is the wound so badly inflamed? And it's bleeding." Feeling the stuffy heat in the room, she asked in surprise, "Why is the air conditioning turned off? In weather this hot, covering a wound like this is the easiest way for it to get infected." Only then did Willow abruptly turn her head toward me. When she saw the blood seeping through the gauze on my back and my pallid face, shock and panic flashed across her expression. "George, why didn't you say anything?" I slowly raised my eyes to look at her. The corner of my mouth curved into an extremely faint, yet unbearably bitter, self-mocking smile. "I did say something, but did you hear me?" I paused. My voice was as light as a feather, yet it crashed heavily into Willow's heart. "Weren't you more worried that he couldn't handle the draft?" Chapter 6. Willow froze where she stood, her face alternating between pale and ashen. She opened her mouth as if to argue, but in the end, she simply turned around and switched the air conditioning back on at once, her voice dry and stiff. "Sorry. Makoto fell into the water years ago. He's physically sensitive to the cold. Any draft gives him headaches and makes him sick." For a moment, she had forgotten that I was still injured, that my wounds could easily become infected. She couldn't say the rest, nor was she able to. I closed my eyes and stopped looking at her. 10 years. She could still remember Makoto's every little weakness so clearly, care for him so meticulously. Then what were these 5 years of mine? A temporary save file, one that could be overwritten at any time. Just then, a sudden commotion and crying broke out outside the ward. Willow frowned in displeasure and said to the bodyguard at the door, "Go see what's going on. Tell them to keep it down. Don't disturb George's rest." The bodyguard acknowledged and went out, but only a few minutes later, he rushed back in, panic written all over his face. "Miss Liu, something's wrong. Mr. Ito was mistakenly injured by medical rioters downstairs. He was stabbed several times and is bleeding heavily. He's in the ER being resuscitated." "What?" Willow Liu's face changed dramatically as she sprang to her feet. She didn't even spare me a glance. She rushed out of the ward like a gust of wind. My heart sank hard with her departure. Enduring the intense pain in my back, I struggled out of bed, wanting to follow and see what was happening. By the time I painfully made my way to the emergency room entrance, I heard the doctor saying anxiously that Makoto had a rare panda blood type, Rh negative, and the blood bank was critically low. They were urgently coordinating supplies from nearby facilities. Hearing this, Willow immediately rolled up her sleeve. "Take mine. I'm Rh negative too. Take as much as you need. Just save him." I leaned there against the cold wall, watching helplessly as bright red blood flowed out of Willow's veins, bit by bit transfused into Makoto's body. My heart felt as though it were being stabbed over and over by that same knife, hurting until it went numb. Willow lost a great deal of blood. Her face grew visibly pale, yet she didn't care at all, only pacing anxiously outside the emergency room, refusing to go rest. Just then, some family members passed by at the other end of the corridor. Their idle chatter drifted over faintly. "I heard Ling Mountain Temple outside the city is really effective." My mother-in-law, for my son who was in a coma, knelt and kowtowed every 3 steps up all 999 steps to beg the abbot for a blessed Buddhist bead bracelet. That very night, my son woke up. I subconsciously looked toward Willow. Sure enough, her eyes lit up instantly. Without a moment's hesitation, she turned and rushed straight out of the hospital. My heart sank completely. I returned to the ward and numbly opened my phone. The first local live stream push that popped up was shocking. Lu Group's CEO kneels devoutly for love, kowtowing every 3 steps to obtain sacred Ling Mountain prayer beads. In the live stream footage, Willow's expensive haute couture was covered in dust. Her forehead was bruised purple and blue, even seeping blood. Yet she remained utterly determined, climbing the long stone steps, 1 step, 1 kowtow at a time. The comment section exploded. "Oh my God, it's Willow. She actually went this far for her boyfriend. So touching. I heard she and her boyfriend have been together for many years and their relationship has always been great. This is real love. I'm so jealous. I stared at those comments, my heart clenched tightly by an invisible hand, aching until I could barely breathe. Yes, we had indeed been together for many years, but this time, the one she was kneeling and praying for, was not me, the boyfriend she had been together with for many years. But that long-cherished, unattainable crush she had never let go of. Chapter 7. In the days that followed, Willow never appeared again. From the nurse's casual conversations, I learned that after obtaining the prayer beads, she had ignored her own weakened condition and the injury on her forehead, staying day and night by Makoto's bedside, personally taking care of him. I opened my Moments feed. The very first post that refreshed was from Makoto. The photo showed a string of dark prayer beads. The caption read, "Survived a great calamity. Grateful for everything. Special thanks to someone's one step. One kowtow, a devotion worth more than gold." The next second, I saw Willow's avatar appear in the list of likes. At that moment, my heart hurt so badly I could barely breathe. Trembling, I closed the app. The world instantly became quiet, but the emptiness and icy chill in my chest remained. On the day I was discharged, Willow drove over to pick me up. Looking at my pale complexion, she said softly, "You've lost too much weight. Makoto hasn't been eating well lately either. Today, I'll take both of you to eat something good and nourish yourselves." I sat silently in the back seat, watching the cityscape rush backward outside the window. Makoto sat in the passenger seat, smiling brightly as he chatted with Willow about recent happenings. In a daze, I felt as though I were the unnecessary outsider. At the restaurant, Willow took meticulous care of Makoto throughout the meal. She patiently peeled shrimp for him, neatly arranging the shrimp meat on his plate. From time to time, she refilled his water and gently wiped the sauce from the corner of his mouth with a napkin. A young couple at the next table cast envious glances our way. The boy whispered to his girlfriend, "Look at his girlfriend, she treats her boyfriend so well." Willow and Makoto exchanged a look. Neither of them spoke up to deny it. My heart ached as if pierced by needles. I could no longer sit still. I stood up and said, "I'm going to the restroom." Inside, I splashed cold water on my face again and again, trying to calm myself down. Just then, a shrill fire alarm suddenly rang out, and thick smoke rapidly spread. Panicked, I rushed out to warn Willow and Makoto, but when I ran back to our table, I found it completely empty. She had already taken him and left. She hadn't even thought of me. I let out a bitter smile and escaped the fire alone. When I finally reached a safe area, I saw not far away Willow anxiously checking Makoto for injuries. Makoto shook his head. "I'm fine. George is still inside. You should go check on him." Only then did Willow remember me. She was just about to turn around when she saw me standing not far away. She walked over quickly and asked with concern, "George, are you all right?" I looked at her, my heart filled with desolation. If Makoto hadn't reminded her, would she have completely forgotten that I even existed? "I'm fine," I heard myself say, my voice frighteningly calm. Willow seemed to relax a little, then said, "Makoto was badly shaken. I need to take him back. We're not on the same route. Can you take a cab home yourself?" After saying that, without waiting for my response, she had already turned around and left, shielding Makoto as she went. I stood there, watching the familiar black Maybach speed away into the distance. It was rush hour, and we just had a fire. There were no cabs to be found. Soon, rain began to fall from the sky. With no other choice, I dragged my not yet healed body, walking step by step through the cold rain. 3 hours later, I finally made it home. My feet were covered in blisters, my whole body soaked through. Utterly miserable, I silently treated my wounds, took a hot shower, and collapsed onto the bed in exhaustion. It was late at night when Willow finally returned, carrying the faint smell of alcohol and the familiar fragrance Makoto always used. She lifted the blanket and lay down beside me, habitually trying to hold me and kiss me. I pulled away, my voice weary. "Before you've figured things out, let's not do this." Willow paused, stunned for a moment. "George, are you still angry because I didn't call you during the fire today, or because I didn't give you a ride home?" She tried to pull me back into her arms, her tone like she was soothing a sulking child. "Stop making a fuss. All these years I've been with you, there's only ever been you in my heart, no one else." Those words stabbed straight into my heart. No one else. Then what was Makoto? The men for whom she broke her own rules to peel shrimp. The men who made her lose control in panic. The men she gave blood for and knelt to pray for. What was he? Yes, all these years, there had indeed only been me by her side, and she had never mentioned Makoto. But the moment Makoto reappeared, she became a completely different person. And that only proved one thing even more clearly. Makoto had always been hidden in the most precious depths of her heart. She had never spoken of him, but she had never forgotten him either. Chapter 8. Suppressing the pain in my heart, I turned over and faced away from her, replying perfunctorily, "I know. Go to sleep." Willow looked at my cold, distant back. In the end, she could only sigh, wrap her arms around me from behind, and stop trying to do anything else. The next day, perhaps out of guilt, Willow suggested taking me to watch a meteor shower. "Didn't you always want to see one? You're on leave anyway, we can go together," she said gently, as if last night's unpleasantness had never happened. I wanted to say I didn't want to go, but she half coaxed, half dragged me into the car. Halfway through the drive, Willow's phone rang. It was Makoto. His voice on the other end was excited and full of anticipation. "Willow, I heard there's a Leo meteor shower tonight. We missed it back in high school. This time we have to go to the mountaintop together." Willow subconsciously glanced at me in the passenger seat. I simply turned my head toward the window. Expressionless, she hesitated for a moment, then said softly into the phone, "Sure, George and I are already on our way. Since you want to go too, let's all go together." My heart clenched violently, the pain nearly making me curl up. She was always like this, so effortlessly turning me into the extra one, the option that needed to be accommodated. The car detoured to pick up Makoto. The moment he got in, he apologized repeatedly. "George, I'm really sorry. I didn't know you two had a date today. I just got back to the country, and Willow's basically my only friend here, so I thought I'd ask her to go with me." I said nothing, only nodded faintly. After reaching the foot of the mountain, the car could go no farther, and the three of us had to hike the rest of the way up. Along the way, Willow took meticulous care of Makoto, supporting him at times, reminding him to watch his step at others. Midway through, Makoto accidentally twisted his ankle. Cold sweat broke out as he winced in pain. Without hesitation, Willow crouched down, took on most of his weight, and carried him step by step toward the summit. I followed behind them, watching Willow's slender back, my heart utterly chilled. By the time we reached the top, night had already fallen. The meteor shower arrived as scheduled, brilliant streaks cutting across the night sky. Makoto excitedly shouted out his wish. "I want to become the best chief reporter in the country." Then he smiled and asked Willow, "Willow, what did you wish for?" Willow looked at him gently, a smile at her lips. "If you say it out loud, it won't come true." I turned my head slightly to look at her. I knew, her wish must have been about Makoto. "What about you, George?" Makoto asked again. "What did you wish for?" I looked at the night sky where the meteors vanished and said softly, "My wish." Saying it out loud wouldn't make it come true either. My wish was that Willow and I would never see each other again in this lifetime. After the meteor shower, the three of us prepared to head back down the mountain. The path was steep. Makoto lost his footing and cried out as he rolled down the slope. In his panic, he instinctively grabbed my wrist, dragging me down with him. We both crashed heavily at the bottom of the slope. A sharp pain shot through me, and I felt warmth spreading along my leg. I was clearly bleeding. Fortunately, the slope wasn't too deep. Willow soon rushed down anxiously. "Makoto, George, are you okay?" Makoto's voice was weak. "Willow, my foot hurts so much. I don't think I can move it." I tried to speak, but even breathing felt like it was tearing me apart. I was clearly more seriously injured. Willow checked the situation, her brows tightly knitted. In the end, she made her choice. She helped Makoto up and spoke to me rapidly. "George, hang on. Makoto's foot is injured. I'll take him up first and immediately get someone to come back for you. Stay here and don't move, no matter what." After that, she supported Makoto and quickly disappeared into the dark forest. I lay on the cold mountainside, staring at the direction they vanished in, the pain in my chest far greater than the pain in my body. I waited, and waited, from deep night until dawn began to break. Dew soaked through my clothes. Cold and blood loss gradually blurred my consciousness. She never came back. Despair flooded over me like a tide. I knew that if I didn't save myself, I might really die there. Using the very last bit of strength I had, I dragged my shattered body, inch by inch, painfully climbing back up the slope. Every movement felt like being carved alive. Blood soaked my clothes and the dirt beneath me. Finally, I reached the road. With all my remaining strength, I raised my hand toward the occasional passing cars. "Help!" At last, a car stopped. I saw someone running toward me. The tight knot in my chest finally loosened. My vision went black, and I completely lost consciousness. Chapter 9. When I woke up again, I found myself lying in a hospital bed. Willow was keeping watch by my side. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face filled with that all too familiar mixture of guilt and anxiety. The moment she saw me open my eyes, she immediately grabbed my hand, her voice hoarse. "George, you're awake. I'm so sorry. Makoto really couldn't be left alone. I didn't mean to leave you there for so long. I went back to look for you later, but you were already gone." She started explaining again, started making promises again. "I swear, I'll never leave you alone again. Never." I looked at her quietly. There was no longer any love or light in my eyes, only boundless exhaustion and a dead, desolate emptiness. I no longer believed her. The day I was discharged happened to be the 5th anniversary of our relationship. Willow picked me up and took me home. When she pushed open the door, the apartment had been carefully decorated, flickering candlelight, roses spread across the dining table, and a delicate cake placed right in the center. She seemed to genuinely want to make up for things, to properly spend this anniversary with me. She lit the candles and said softly, "George, make a wish." I gazed at the dancing flames, but my heart was like stagnant water, unable to stir even the slightest ripple. I no longer had any wishes to make for her, nor did I harbor any expectations of a future with her, so I simply closed my eyes and gently blew out the candles. Willow didn't notice my indifference. Just as she was about to cut the cake, her phone rang once again. It was Makoto. Whatever was said on the other end made her hesitate. She looked at me, opened her mouth as if to speak, but didn't know how. I spoke first, my voice calm to the point of detachment. "Go ahead." She froze. Perfect timing. I looked at her, my gaze hollow. "Spend more time with him. That way, you can really think it through. Figure out who it is you truly love." Emotion and relief instantly flooded Willow's face. She held my hand tightly. "George, thank you for understanding me. Makoto's emotions have been pretty unstable these past few days. He really depends on me. I'll stay with him for now, and once he's doing better, I'll come back." She pressed a grateful kiss to my forehead, then grabbed her coat and hurried out of the apartment. The moment the door closed, the calm on my face finally shattered, revealing a deep, piercing pain, only for it to quickly sink back into numbness. Not long after she left, I received a call from the visa center, informing me that my visa had been approved. I thanked them softly, hung up, and walked into the bedroom. From the depths of the closet, I pulled out the suitcase I had packed long ago. 5 years of living in this home, yet all the traces I left behind fit into a single suitcase. After one last glance around, without the slightest hint of attachment, I pulled the suitcase along and left, without looking back. Chapter 10. A few days later, Willow returned with a limited edition watch she had bought for George, along with a bouquet of tulips he used to love, planning to properly make it up to him. But when she pushed open the door, the house was eerily quiet. "George," she called out. No response. An inexplicable panic surged in her chest. She hurried into the bedroom. The wardrobe stood wide open. All of his clothes were gone. The desk was completely bare. Every trace that belonged to him had been wiped clean. The entire room was so immaculate it was as if he had never lived there at all. She froze in place, her mind going blank, then hurriedly pulled out her phone and dialed his number. "Sorry, the number you have dialed is currently busy." She didn't believe it. She redialed again and again, only to hear the same message over and over. "Sorry, the number you have dialed is currently busy. Sorry, the number you have dialed is currently busy. Sorry, the number you have dialed is currently busy." He had blocked her. Willow's face instantly turned livid. She raised her hand sharply, almost smashing the phone to the ground. But in the end, the last shred of restraint made her stop. Instead, she began frantically calling everyone who might possibly know where he had gone. The first call went to his closest friend. The phone rang for a long time before it was picked up. The background was noisy, as if he were outside. "Hello, Miss Liu." His friend sounded surprised. There was even a hint of barely concealed nervousness. "Where is George?" Willow demanded bluntly, without any pleasantries. Her tone was cold, sharp, and interrogative. George, I don't know. He didn't tell me." The hesitation in his voice was obvious. "You don't know." Willow's anger flared even higher. Her voice shot up, radiating an oppressive chill. "He didn't even tell you. You'd better tell me the truth." "Miss Liu, I really don't know. Maybe he just disappeared because he needs you to give him some space." "Space?" Willow let out a cold, mocking laugh, as if she had heard the most ridiculous joke in the world. "I'll ask one last time. Where is he?" There was a brief silence on the other end. Then came a soft sigh, followed by the busy tone after the call was hung up. Beep, beep, beep. Willow Liu stared at the disconnected call, practically exploding with rage. He actually dared to hang up on her. Even the people around him dared to treat her like this now. She immediately called several of George's colleagues, only to receive vague replies like, "Not too sure," or polite but distant responses such as, "Miss Liu, this is reporter Wang's personal matter. It's not convenient for us to get involved." This wall of concealment and refusal poured fuel directly onto the fire in her chest. He had joined forces with everyone to hide from her, treating her like a fool. What exactly was he trying to do? Find him. Do it now. She slammed the speed dial button, practically roaring into the phone at her special assistant. Her voice was twisted and trembling with extreme fury, and with a trace of panic she herself hadn't yet realized. "Use every resource we have. 1 hour. I'll give you 1 hour at most. I want to know exactly where he went. Now. Immediately. The vast intelligence and crisis management network of the Lu Group, normally used for business warfare, began operating at full efficiency. All for the sake of finding a man who had left home. Every passing second felt like torture to Willow. Like a trapped beast, she paced back and forth in the empty living room. Her expensive custom heels struck the pristine floor in rapid, dull beats, echoing relentlessly through the suffocating silence. Less than half an hour later, the phone rang. She answered instantly. Speak. Her assistant, clearly sensing how close she was to erupting, spoke with unprecedented caution and disbelief. Miss Lu, we found him. Mr. Wang, he bought a one-way ticket to Beirut the night before last. The visa type shows that it's a war correspondent visa. What? Willow shot up from the sofa, veins bulging at her temples. The Middle East, a war correspondent. Has he lost his mind? Just to spite me. He doesn't even care about his life anymore. After the initial shock came surging, uncontrollable fury, and a powerful sense of humiliation at being openly challenged. In her eyes, this wasn't the pursuit of an ideal at all. This was George throwing a tantrum in the most extreme, reckless way possible, using his own life and safety to threaten her, to punish her. He was trying to force her to give in, to force her to compromise. Chapter 11. Prepare the plane immediately. We're going to the Middle East. She issued the order into the phone without the slightest hesitation, her voice icy and sharp, every word edged with frost. I want to see just how far he can take this tantrum. This is completely out of control. Grabbing her car keys and coat, she strode out the door. All the way there, her mind was filled with towering rage, and with thoughts of how to teach a lesson to that disobedient man who had disregarded his own safety and caused her enormous trouble. Her motive was simple and crude. Go to that damned, dangerous place and drag him back. As for salvaging their relationship, it had never even crossed her mind that it needed salvaging. In her view, he had simply gone too far with his tantrum. All she needed to do was show up, pull him out of danger, and everything would return to normal. After a long flight and a series of tedious, even slightly risky, clearance procedures, Willow's private jet finally landed at Beirut Airport. The moment she set foot on this land, the dry air thick with gunpowder and dust, combined with distant sounds she couldn't tell were celebratory gunfire or active clashes, made the woman accustomed to first-class cabins and five-star hotels frown deeply in discomfort. She subconsciously tugged at her collar, as if that could somehow block out the unsettling atmosphere. The temporary news station in the war zone was located in a building that looked relatively solid, though bullet holes still scarred its walls. People wearing bulletproof vests, hurried, exhausted, yet sharp-eyed, moved in and out, among the busy crowd of journalists and staff of different skin tones, all dressed in similar protective gear. Willow spotted George almost instantly. He was standing by a table hastily assembled from rough wooden boards. A large regional map spread across it. He and several foreign colleagues were gathered around the map, fingers moving rapidly across it as they spoke at high speed, arguing at times, nodding in agreement at others. A monitoring headset rested on his head, one side hanging loosely around his neck. The lines of his profile were taut, his gaze fixed intently on the map. That look, utter focus, driven by a clear sense of purpose, was something Willow had never once seen on his face before. He had lost a lot of weight. The slight softness in his cheeks was gone, his jawline now sharp and defined. Prolonged lack of sleep had left dark shadows under his eyes, and wind and sun had roughened his skin somewhat. Yet his eyes were startlingly bright, burning with a light Willow found both unfamiliar and painfully glaring. A light forged from responsibility, professional conviction, and independent resilience. He was no longer the man whose eyes held only her, the man who would get jealous over the smallest thing. That realization struck Willow's chest like a red-hot needle, catching her completely off guard. A sharp, unfamiliar pain flared, followed by a surge of panic that made her heart tighten and her breath hitch for half a second. But she quickly suppressed that strange feeling. Anger, and the determination to drag him back, once again took the upper hand. Chapter 12. She strode over, ignoring the startled looks around her, grabbed my arm, and her habitual command slipped out, forceful and unquestionable. George, look at yourself. What do you think you're doing? Come back with me immediately. She expected that, like before, the moment she appeared, I would compromise without hesitation and go with her. But my reaction was completely beyond her expectations. I frowned slightly, then calmly, almost with a hint of disgust, shook her hand off with force. I lifted my head and looked at her with an icy, distant gaze, as if she were an irrelevant stranger. My voice was even and flat. Miss Lu, please conduct yourself properly. This is a work area. I'm working. What do you need? Miss Lu. The form of address was like a bucket of ice water poured straight over Willow's head, freezing her in place. She was nailed there by the sudden rejection and that cold Miss Lu, hardly able to believe her own ears. What did you call me? She repeated, her voice rising slightly with shock and anger, sharp with offense. "George, haven't you had enough of this nonsense?" She stepped closer, trying to force me into submission with the pressure she was so used to wielding. 5 years. We were together for 5 years. You just walk away like that, over something so trivial, just because I took a little extra care of Makoto lately, and you take revenge on me like this, running off to this hellhole where people get killed, throwing your life away. Do you have any idea how dangerous it is here?" Her voice grew louder and louder, drawing the attention of several foreign colleagues nearby. They stopped what they were doing, frowning as they looked over, their eyes filled with obvious disapproval and caution. Someone even stepped forward instinctively, subtly positioning themselves slightly in front of me, as if to shield me. I wasn't intimidated by her rage. I didn't even look at the colleagues trying to protect me. I merely lifted my chin slightly and met her reddened eyes calmly. After listening to that long string of accusations, my face remained expressionless. I only let out a very light, very faint smile. There was no warmth in that smile, only a weary, all-seeing irony that inexplicably stabbed Willow in the chest. "Willow." My voice was still steady, but it was like a cold surgical blade, beginning to peel back the truth layer by layer. "Between us, is it really just because you took a little extra care of Makoto?" I tilted my head slightly, my gaze holding a near-cruel composure. "Do you want me to help you recall it, one item at a time?" Without waiting for her answer, I continued. My pace wasn't fast, but every word was crystal clear, striking the still air, and striking Willow's face as it gradually stiffened. "When the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling window shattered and glass flew everywhere, who was the person you instinctively leapt past me to protect tightly in your arms? In the hospital room, who only had to say he was afraid of drafts for you to shut off the air conditioning without hesitation, leaving the stitched wound on my back to fester, swell, bleed in the heat, hurting so badly I couldn't sleep? At the celebration dinner terrace, who did you lose control for, throwing punches like a madwoman, and then help up and take away, right in front of me? When I was lying on the operating table and the doctor couldn't find a family member to sign the surgical consent, when they called you, whose hospital room were you in, saying impatiently that I was acting, that I was making trouble? On the mountaintop watching the meteor shower, whose ankle twisted just a little, and you immediately helped him up, leaving me dragged down the slope, my leg split open by rocks and bleeding nonstop, alone in the wilderness all night. And our 5th anniversary, the candles on the cake had barely gone out when you received whose call, stood up at once, and left me without a second thought. Before you left, you even remembered to thank me for understanding, didn't you? One by one, I listed them. No hysteria, no sobbing accusations, just facts, as if I were telling someone else's story, yet every detail was like an ice-hardened carving knife, precisely slicing open the self-deception around Willow's heart and exposing the bloody truth underneath. Willow was left speechless. The color drained from her face bit by bit. Her initial fury was replaced by a sudden, unguarded panic. She opened her mouth, but it was as if something had tightened around her throat, leaving her unable to form a complete sound. She wanted to argue. She wanted to say, "That's not how it was." She wanted to say, "I only did it because." But under my calm, unflinching gaze, those pale excuses looked unbearably ridiculous and utterly powerless. Chapter 13. I was just, she struggled to put words together, but her mind was in complete chaos. "You were just instinctively choosing him." I cut off her futile attempt, my gaze utterly devoid of emotion. There was only a dead, lucid clarity, every single time, without exception, in your heart. Even the slightest discomfort of his mattered more than anything earth-shattering that happened to me. I looked at her, my eyes as cold and clear as mountain stream water, reflecting her current dishevelment and pallor. "Willow, look carefully, you were never torn between Makoto and me." I paused. Then, word by word, my voice calm yet final, like the last verdict being delivered. "From the very beginning, you chose him, without hesitation. Now, I've simply helped you confirm your choice." I shifted slightly to the side and made a small please gesture, distant and resolute. "So take that confirmation with you, and leave my world. Don't interfere with my work again, and don't interfere with my life." After that, I didn't spare her another glance, as if she were nothing more than irrelevant air. I turned back and rejoined the discussion with my colleagues, pointing at a coordinate on the map and speaking rapidly in fluent English, my tone focused and professional. The storm that had been powerful enough to overturn her entire world seemed, to me, no more than brushing a speck of dust off my sleeve. Willow stood there, completely frozen. The foreign colleagues around us withdrew their gazes and returned to their own work. No one paid her any more attention, this sudden intruder who was clearly unwelcome. All that remained in the air were the low voices of my colleagues discussing work, and the distant, dull sounds that constantly reminded everyone where we were. She stared at my calm, detached profile, listened to me communicate smoothly with others, and for the first time, a cold, Creeping panic, like mud from a swamp, began to spread upward from her feet, slowly engulfing her heart. For the first time, she truly felt that everything had gone completely, irreversibly out of her control. George wasn't saying those things in a fit of madness or spite. He really didn't want her anymore. That realization struck her nervous system like an icy needle, catching her completely off guard. A violent surge of loss and disorientation seized her, threatening to swallow her whole. No, impossible. He had to still be angry. Yes, this had to be it. He just needed time to calm down. She couldn't leave like this. If she walked away now, then it would truly be over. Almost instinctively, Willow did not leave. She mobilized an astonishing amount of money and connections, stubborn to the point of obsession, forcing herself to remain in this place she despised to her core, a filthy, dangerous hellhole in her eyes. Chapter 14. She found herself a perfectly righteous excuse, protecting me. And so, on this war-torn land, an extremely jarring and uncomfortable sight appeared. Whenever my team's interview convoy moved through shattered ruins, several expensive, gleaming black off-road vehicles would always trail far behind us, like ghosts that couldn't be shaken off. She tried to force her way into my life and my work, like a clumsy, unwelcome intruder. The elite security team she sent was politely refused. The costly supplies she brought, fresh fruits and vegetables, purified water, even desserts from a shop I used to like, looked absurd and ironic against the backdrop of local scarcity. She even attempted to force her way into my interview itinerary, which only drew deeper resentment and made my colleagues even more guarded. She became an unwanted shadow, stubbornly looming over me, yet completely unable to integrate into my world. It was precisely during this suffocating tailing that she was, for the first time, forced to witness up close, helplessly and clearly, how I worked, how I lived. She saw how, in the brief lulls between shelling, I calmly raised my camera to document the ruins, how I struggled to communicate with terrified civilians in halting local phrases, my eyes filled with sincere compassion and respect, how, in conditions of extreme scarcity, I shared a single piece of dry, hard bread with colleagues, and even locals, drinking from the same bottle of water without a second thought, how I repeatedly ventured closer to the front lines, disregarding danger, just to obtain the most truthful first-hand reports. Without her, I wasn't just surviving well, I was even radiating a vitality she had never seen before, brighter, tougher, more compelling. It was a strength rooted in suffering yet growing toward the light, far more powerful than any flower carefully cultivated in a greenhouse. This realization began to gnaw at her heart like countless tiny ants, day and night, bringing a strange, slow, relentless dull pain, and with it came an even deeper fear, one that nearly drowned her. The belief she had always clung to, George needs me, was being ruthlessly shaken, dismantled inch, by the ironclad reality before her eyes. That day, my team decided to move deeper into the core conflict zone for an interview. The situation there was like a bowstring stretched to its limit. The air was thick with gunpowder and an unsettling silence. Willow's convoy still followed us like an inescapable shadow, lingering far behind. Sitting inside her armored vehicle, she looked out at the devastated landscape with agitation, her heart filled with disdain for this dangerous environment and anger at my recklessness. To her, I was dancing on a blade, doing this purely to spite her. Suddenly, without any warning, a violent explosion erupted nearby. Immediately after, dense gunfire cracked like exploding beans. The clash had escalated. "Take cover. Find shelter, now," the seasoned security chief roared through the radio. Chaos exploded instantly. Screams, cries, whizzing bullets, and collapsing debris collided into a deafening storm. Willow's heart clenched violently, her gaze locking onto the figure ahead, wearing a bulletproof vest, yet still looking frighteningly thin. In the midst of the chaos, I suddenly lunged toward a local little boy who had frozen in the middle of the road, crying in terror. Almost at the same moment, a dull thud sounded. Willow saw it clearly. My shoulder jolted violently. A shocking bloom of red spread across my dust-colored vest, rapidly expanding. The force of the bullet sent me staggering backward. Together with the child, I crashed behind a pile of collapsed walls and rubble, instantly swallowed by smoke and debris, disappearing from sight. George. Willow felt a deafening buzz explode in her head, as if all sound in the world had been sucked away. Blood rushed violently to her head. Her vision went black for a split second. All the anger, all the calculations, all the resentment, all the pride, they were obliterated in that instant. What remained was only the most primitive, savage fear. Like an icy giant hand, it seized her heart mercilessly, squeezing until she could barely breathe. She didn't even realize when she shoved the car door open and rushed out. "Miss Lou, come back. It's dangerous." The bodyguard's shouts and the shriek of bullets faded into distant noise behind her. She couldn't hear anything. She couldn't see anything. She ran toward the place where I had fallen. Like a beast driven mad, stripped of all reason, she charged straight into the ruins. Stray bullets whistled past her ears and body. Flying debris sliced through her expensive suit, her cheek, her arms, burning with pain she didn't even feel. George, George, answer me, she screamed, her voice shattered and distorted by terror. She clawed frantically at the rubble with her bare hands. Bricks and twisted steel tore into her fingers, blood pouring freely, yet she felt nothing. Finally, she saw me, my face pale as paper, smeared with dust and blood, my eyes tightly shut, the blood stains on my vest unbearably vivid. At that moment, Willow felt as if a massive hand had seized her heart and twisted it violently, the pain so intense it nearly tore her apart. Chapter 15. Hang on, George, I'll get you out, I'm here. Her voice trembled violently, almost incoherent. She carefully moved away the rubble pressing on my leg, then used all her strength to lift me up, shielding me with her entire back and the back of her head, as if doing so could block every fatal danger. Protecting me, she staggered backward through the hail of bullets, one unsteady step after another. Every step felt like walking on knife blades. Suddenly, a piercing pain shot through her left calf. She let out a muffled groan, her knee buckling as she nearly collapsed to the ground. A stray bullet had struck her leg. She glanced down briefly. Blood was gushing out of the bullet hole, quickly soaking her pant leg, but she only clenched her teeth, veins bulging on her forehead. Taking a sharp breath, she held me even tighter, dragging that injured leg without stopping, charging forward like a madwoman. There was only one thought in her mind. Don't stop, no matter what. Get him somewhere safe. It wasn't until she had safely delivered me onto the Red Cross ambulance that rushed in response, watching the doors close, that all her strength seemed to drain away at once. She staggered, bracing herself against the ambulance door, gasping for breath, her face pale as paper. Outside the operating room, time crawled by with unbearable slowness. Her leg had only received basic bleeding control and bandaging. The bullet was still lodged inside. Every slight movement sent tearing pain through her body, but she didn't care. She stood there like a statue, staring fixedly at the tightly closed operating room door, her eyes hollow with fear. In her mind, the image replayed over and over again, George collapsing after being shot, blood spreading across his clothes. Each replay chilled her to the bone, making her tremble uncontrollably. Faced with such extreme fear and the threat of loss, the ridiculous arrogance and self-importance she had always clung to were completely shattered. At this moment, she realized with absolute clarity, she could not lose George, absolutely not. However, this realization, forced out of her at the edge of life and death, was soon interpreted and digested by her deeply ingrained, distorted way of thinking. After the initial shock passed, she leaned against the cold wall, looking at her own disheveled, blood-stained state, and an absurd, almost relieved thought slowly rose in her heart. See, George, without me, you would have died. You see that now, don't you? You can't survive without my protection. Your so-called independence, your ideals, this hellhole you insisted on coming to, it almost cost you your life. You were just being willful, reckless, treating your life like a joke to spite me. She regarded her instinct-driven, near-suicidal rescue as powerful, irrefutable proof of love, and as her greatest leverage to make him come to his senses and change his mind. She even began rehearsing what she would say once he woke up, how she would educate him, persuade him, make him face reality and obediently go back with her. A few days later, I finally pulled through and woke up from the coma. Willow immediately dragged her injured leg forward, almost throwing herself at my bedside. Her face was filled with post-disaster relief, and with a hint of expectation, one she didn't even realize carried the air of seeking credit. She grabbed my uninjured hand, her voice urgent. George, you're awake. You scared me to death, do you know that? Her voice choked slightly with emotion. Thank goodness I got there in time. Look how dangerous it was, without me. This time you really would have. She paused, trying to make her tone sound more reasonable, more like stating facts than scolding. This place is far too dangerous. It's not somewhere you should be staying. Stop being willful. Once you recover, we'll go back home immediately. From now on, never. Her words stopped abruptly, because she saw me slowly turn my head to look at her. There was no dependence, no gratitude, no fear after surviving death, none of what she had expected. Only an icy, almost indifferent calm, and a clear, polite distance, as if I were looking at someone who had indeed saved my life, someone deserving of thanks, but still a stranger I had no desire to be entangled with. I moved my dry, cracked lips slightly. My voice was weak, yet unmistakably clear, as I interrupted her. Thank you, Miss Lou, for saving my life. My gaze swept over my heavily bandaged shoulder, then fell on her leg as well, also wrapped in bandages. Blood seeping through. I continued in that same even, emotionless tone. For the medical expenses this time, the ones you covered in advance, and for all other losses resulting from this incident, please have your assistant prepare a detailed list. I paused, then added, "Once I return home, I'll find a way to pay you back in full." Willow was completely stunned. It was as if someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over her head, freezing her solid on the spot, or as if she had been struck head-on by a sledgehammer, her vision spinning, ears ringing, the whole world reeling. "Thanks. Pay her back." She had nearly lost her life, a bullet still lodged in her leg, risked everything there, and in return, she got nothing but a polite thank you and a cold, meticulously drawn line of repayment. The gratitude she expected, the reconciliation, the renewed dependence. Even George finally realizing his mistake and yielding. None of it happened. Chapter 16. The enormous disparity and the incomprehensible reality were like an icy awl, stabbing viciously into her chaotic mind. For the first time, she began to dimly yet clearly realize things might truly not be as simple as the throwing a tantrum or being willful she had imagined. George seemed to genuinely want to draw a clear line between them. Even the debt of saving her life was something he intended to measure and sever with money. An unprecedented, overwhelming panic and a fierce sense of confusion wrapped around her heart like seaweed from the deep ocean, leaving her almost unable to breathe. Yet the arrogance and conceit forged from years of immersion in power and control were like a suit of hardened armor, protecting her fragile core, making her unwilling and afraid to probe the true source of that panic. Almost instinctively, she chose the explanation that best fit her way of thinking. It must be because she hadn't done enough. It must be Makoto's existence, still like a poisonous thorn lodged in George's heart, that prevented him from peacefully returning to her side. As long as she completely eliminated this obstacle and proved to him that there was only him in her heart, all problems would be solved effortlessly. Yes, that had to be it. After her condition stabilized, despite her fierce objections, I insisted on returning to the country. Willow followed close behind like a parasite attached to bone, dragging along a leg that had not yet fully healed. She seemed to have fallen into a kind of obsessive madness, vowing not to stop until she achieved her goal. After returning home, she launched an even more high-profile, more intensive, and more self-righteous campaign of winning me back. Every single day, without fail, she had people deliver expensive luxury goods, rare jewelry, keys to top-tier sports cars. She even rented all the massive billboards in the core commercial districts and transportation hubs of City A. For an entire week, they looped carefully designed confessions. "George, I love you. Come back." Willow's only love in this lifetime is George. She frequently appeared downstairs at the TV station and outside the residential complex of my newly rented apartment, trying to intercept me and force me to have a talk. She was always accompanied by bodyguards and assistants, the spectacle enormous, drawing constant attention from passers-by. While gossip tabloids ran consecutive front-page stories, everything she did, rather than being an attempt to win me back, felt more like a grand, self-indulgent performance staged for herself. She was proving to everyone that Willow had already bowed her head, had already lowered herself to try her best to reconcile, and that I should no longer be ungrateful or push my luck. However, my response was like a series of loud slaps, mercilessly striking her face. All gifts were returned intact. The recipient name on the delivery slips read Reporter Wong, not Mr. Wong. Those expensive billboards were up for only one day. On the second day, they were all removed and replaced with public service ads and commercial advertisements, at an astonishingly high efficiency. I negotiated directly through station leadership and even paid the breach of contract penalties myself. My attitude was firm and uncompromising. The harshest move of all was this: I even released a short but resolute public statement through the TV station's official channels, prominently published on the station's website and partner media outlets. I, George, ended my romantic relationship with Ms. Willow long ago. I am currently focusing on my career development. Please do not disturb my private affairs. I decline any unrelated interviews or attention. Thank you all for your concern. This statement was like a cold surgical knife, precisely severing every possibility of ambiguity and entanglement she tried to create, defining her actions outright as harassment and unrelated attention. Every rejection stacked another layer onto Willow's rage and sense of frustration. She felt as if her dignity was being pressed into the ground and rubbed over and over again. In her fury, she once again wrongly blamed everything on that so-called root of all evil. It must be Makoto. It must be his existence, still like an insurmountable chasm, standing between her and George. As long as she completely eliminated this obstacle and proved to George that there was no one else left in her heart, he would surely change his mind. And so, without further hesitation, she mobilized ruthless, thunderous measures and began to deal with Makoto in a cold and efficient manner. Chapter 17. Willow's methods of dealing with Makoto were fast, precise, and ruthless, carrying an unquestionable coldness. She barely had to expend any effort. Makoto's seemingly glamorous resume and network of connections were as fragile as paper in the face of the vast Liu family intelligence network and capital power. A few phone calls, several perfectly timed, anonymous tips, the sudden withdrawal and defection of key partners. In just a few days, the once highly acclaimed chief reporter Makoto, who had risen to the top the moment he parachuted in, was completely disgraced within City A's media circle and even across the entire social scene. He was molded into the image of a scheming opportunist who climbed the ladder through ambiguous relationships, even going so far as to intrude into someone else's romance as a third party. Some of his less than glorious past incidents were dug up and sensationally amplified. No one dared to hire him anymore, and no circle was willing to accept him. In the end, amid waves of scorn and mockery, he could only pack his bags in disgrace, flee overseas, and vanish completely. After finishing all this, Willow sat in her spacious yet icy office, looking at the final report delivered by her assistant. She felt little emotional fluctuation. Instead, a sense of satisfaction rose within her, like having cleaned house, along with a faint expectation, as if she had rendered some great merit. See, the obstacle had been cleared. For you, I went this far. She almost couldn't wait to find me. This time, she deliberately avoided locations that might easily provoke my resistance. Instead, she intercepted me in the lounge area of an industry banquet, in a setting that seemed relatively natural. She looked at me, her tone even carrying a trace of eagerness and relaxation, almost like claiming credit, though she herself hadn't noticed it. George, she lowered her voice, trying to sound sincere. Look, I've taken care of Makoto. Everything of his has been returned, and he's gone. He won't come back. He'll never appear between us again, never annoy you or become a knot in your heart. She paused, carefully observing my expression, as if waiting for me to show relief or even the slightest softening. Now, you should finally be at ease, right? Her unspoken implication was practically glaring. See, I've done this much for you, cleared away all the obstacles. You should be satisfied now. You should come back. After listening to her, I didn't answer right away. I quietly looked at her for a few seconds. My gaze was so calm that it inexplicably made Willow uneasy. Suddenly, I let out a very soft laugh. There wasn't the slightest hint of being moved or pleased in that smile. Instead, it was filled with an indescribable sense of absurdity and sorrow, as if I had just heard an utterly ridiculous story. Willow. I shook my head. There was a weariness in my voice that seemed to pierce through everything, even carrying a trace of pity. From beginning to end, you really never understood where the problem lay. The bit of expectation on Willow's face instantly froze. There was never any such thing as a Makoto obstacle. My voice was clear and calm, like a surgical blade precisely cutting through all her layers of self-deception. From start to finish, the problem was only you. I looked at her face as it suddenly turned ugly and said each word with force, and your failure to understand love itself. After that, I no longer looked at the shock, disbelief, and rapidly rising fury on her face. It felt like a waste of even a glance. I turned around decisively, leaving behind a resolute, icy silhouette, and disappeared into the sea of well-dressed guests and glittering lights in the banquet hall. Willow stood completely frozen in place. Her ears buzzed as George's final words echoed over and over again. The problem was her. She didn't understand. She didn't love him. Absurd, completely absurd. She had done so much for him. She had even taken a bullet for him, nearly lost her life there. And now she had cleared away all obstacles and troubles for him. When had she ever gone this far for anyone? What more did he want? What more did he expect from her? Chapter 18. Overwhelming rage, resentment, and the humiliation of being completely denied instantly swallowed Willow whole. Her blood rushed to her head with a violent roar. Who did he think he was to say such things? Who gave him the right to deny everything she had done? George, you can only be mine. This obsessive thought screamed wildly in her mind, nearly shattering the cage of reason. I will never let go, never. However, her near uncontrollable frenzy of obsession and pursuit did not last very long, making such a public spectacle over a former boyfriend, even going so far as to mobilize corporate resources to settle personal vendettas, had already gravely angered the elders within the Liu family. A family meeting, so heavy with tension it felt as if water could drip from the air, was convened in the study of the Liu family's old residence, a room that symbolized absolute authority. Willow Liu, you've gone far too overboard lately. Father Liu's face was dark as still water. The agarwood cane in his hand slammed heavily against the floor, producing a dull thud filled with unquestionable authority. For the sake of a man, you've stirred up chaos across the entire city, making it known to everyone. What kind of conduct is this? The group's reputation and even its stock price will be affected. Another elder from the uncle's generation followed up, his tone carrying pressure. The matter of your marriage alliance with the Lin family must be put on the agenda. Young Master Lin has a very favorable impression of you. The union of our two families is crucial to the Lu Group's future strategic layout. This is what you should be focusing on. An arranged marriage? Willow looked as though she had heard the greatest joke in the world. The corner of her lips curved into an icy, razor-sharp smile. Her gaze, keen as a hawk's, swept fearlessly over every elder present who sought to dictate her life. Impossible. She abruptly stood up. Her tall figure radiated an intense sense of oppression, a terrifying low pressure emanating from her entire body. Word by word, she declared clearly, more like a proclamation of obsession pushed to madness. I, Willow, will marry no one but George. Other than him, I want no one. Her eyes swept across the shocked and furious faces around her. Her tone was decisive, leaving no room for negotiation. No one else will ever have me, and I will never belong to anyone else. There is no room for discussion on this matter. She even went so far as to wield her absolute controlling stake, suppressing all dissenting voices in an almost dictatorial manner. Yet this declaration that appeared to be love as deep as the sea, and no one but him, was not, at its core, born entirely of profound love and respect. Rather, it was driven far more by a pathological, unquestionable possessiveness and obsession. He is mine. This thought, like the most vicious curse, spiraled madly through her mind, corroding her reason. He can only be mine. I haven't let go yet. No one else is allowed to take him, and I will never allow myself to belong to anyone else. She stubbornly believed that as long as she refused to let go, as long as she cleared away all so-called obstacles, such as the family-arranged marriage, and proved her resolve to everyone, George would one day see her good, turn back, and everything would return to the starting point under her control. However, reality struck her with its heaviest blow precisely when she was most confident. Just as she was busy dealing with internal family pressure, believing she had eliminated all external obstacles, news about George once again reached her through special channels. The content was simple, yet every word cut like a blade. George had accepted an invitation from an international news organization and was being permanently transferred out of the country, stationed overseas in a region plagued by more frequent conflicts, harsher conditions, and near total isolation, serving as a chief war correspondent. No return date set, and it might even be permanent. Chapter 19. After that, reports about him began to appear frequently during prime time on authoritative international media outlets such as the BBC and CNN. Willow could only see his figure, coldly and from a distance, through news channels she had once disdained. He stood amid the shattered ruins left behind by artillery fire, delivering live reports on sight, his tone steady and his gaze firm like a blazing torch, as if it could pierce straight through the screen. He ventured deep into the heart of the war zone, braving gunfire and shelling to interview all parties involved. His reporting was objective and incisive, filled with the power of humanistic concern. He stood on the stage of an international journalism awards ceremony, dressed in a simple black suit, accepting the trophy that symbolized the highest honor in the profession. Radiant and composed, he delivered a speech about truth and peace with calm confidence. He was moving farther and farther away from her, so far that she could no longer reach him, so far that she could only look up at him through a cold screen like the most ordinary of viewers. The young man who had once nestled in her arms, who could cry and laugh, was gone. In his place stood someone she no longer recognized, brilliant, dazzling, and firmly rooted in a much broader world. The feeling that he had completely broken free from her control, that he no longer needed her or the world she represented, was like an invisible, icy hand that finally clamped tightly around her throat at that very moment, plunging her into an unprecedented, almost overwhelming panic and a suffocating emptiness. He now possessed a magnificent, extraordinary stage of life that belonged entirely to him, and on that stage, from the very beginning, there had never been a place reserved for her. Driven by panic, she began almost frantically trying to re-establish contact, even if it was entirely one-sided. She switched phone numbers repeatedly, dialing every number he might possibly recognize, only to be met each time with a cold, number unavailable, or a busy tone. She wrote long emails, her words shifting from accusations to pleas, all sinking into the void without a single reply. She searched through all his social media accounts, only to find that they had either long stopped updating or that she had been completely blocked and blacklisted. She spared no expense, raising the stakes again and again, bribing every possible channel that might come into contact with him, whether it was his overseas colleagues, assistants, or even locally hired security personnel. The feedback she received was always identical, cold, formulaic, as if copied from the same template. Reporter Wang is very busy. Reporter Wang does not wish to be disturbed. Sorry, no comment. It was as if he had used the hardest steel and the most resolute will to build an invisible yet insurmountable wall between her and himself, completely and permanently isolating her from his world. This total, Airtight rejection brought with it an unprecedented sense of helplessness and terror, which began to gnaw at Willow day and night without pause. She began to suffer from severe insomnia, lying awake night after night in her empty, icy bedroom, staring at the ceiling as his resolute departing figure and those cold, distant eyes replayed endlessly in her mind. Only by relying on large amounts of strong alcohol, enough to nearly numb her nerves, could she barely manage to pass out for a short while. Yet even in those brief, alcohol-dominated dreams, it was always the same image of him turning away, over and over again, looping endlessly. She would wake in a cold sweat every time, her chest aching as if something had been hollowed out from within. Chapter 20. Willow's temper grew increasingly volatile and irritable. Even the most trivial matter could set her off. At the company, she became a walking, extremely unstable powder keg. Her gaze was gloomy, her tone icy and cutting, leaving all executives and employees trembling with fear. As if walking on thin ice, a heavy low pressure hung over the entire upper management of the Lu Group. It felt as though the softest, warmest part of her heart had been brutally dug out, leaving behind a hollow, icy sense of loss that grew clearer by the day. It tormented her so badly that she could neither eat nor sleep, and her entire person visibly withered at an alarming speed. Yet she still stubbornly, almost obsessively, refused to admit that this was the loss of love. She forcibly categorized this soul-ripping pain as nothing more than intense discomfort caused by a broken habit, and the rage that followed the loss of a possession. She had grown accustomed to his meticulous care in her daily life, accustomed to George always revolving around her, placing her at the center of everything, accustomed to all of him. Now he had suddenly withdrawn without warning. Not only was he doing well, he was even thriving and shining brilliantly in realms she could not reach. This severely challenged her deeply ingrained sense of authority and control, something she could neither accept nor comprehend. She just wanted to take back what had originally belonged to her. She told herself this again and again, trying to numb her already panicked and aching heart with this twisted logic. At last, what seemed like a chance opportunity arrived. Because of his outstanding contributions to war reporting, his extraordinary courage, and his profound humanistic concern, George was invited to attend a highly prestigious International Journalism Awards ceremony. The event was held in a major city within the country. Willow almost mobilized every connection and means available to her, sparing no cost, just to obtain an exceedingly rare internal admission pass. She even went to great lengths to bypass the tight security and infiltrate the backstage area, at the end of a relatively quiet corridor connecting the main hall and the lounge, where the lighting was somewhat dim. She finally intercepted the figure who had haunted her day and night these past weeks, who had caused her endless pain and nearly drained all her strength. George. Chapter 21. She spoke, her voice hoarse beyond measure, as if she hadn't spoken properly in a very long time, carrying an uncontrollable tremor and a cautiousness she herself hadn't even noticed. Hearing her, I turned around, seeing her appear here so suddenly. A faint flicker of surprise crossed my face, like seeing a stranger who shouldn't have been here, before it quickly settled back into my usual expression of polite detachment. The Willow before me was almost unrecognizable. The once aloof, exalted, elegant woman, so refined and controlled that even a strand of her hair seemed perfectly in place, now looked unusually haggard and defeated. Dark shadows lay heavily beneath her eyes, impossible to hide. The expensive clothes she wore no longer sat crisp and tailored on her body, instead looking slightly wrinkled and unkempt. All her former pride and sharpness seemed to have been worn away by these days of torment, leaving behind only a deep, bone-deep exhaustion, and a desperate, all-or-nothing air that bordered on despair. She looked at me. There was no longer the dominance, command, or entitlement she once carried in her gaze. Instead, it held a kind of pleading fragility she had never shown before, almost humble. George, she struggled to speak again. Every word seemed squeezed from a throat scraped raw by sandpaper, dry and painful. Those 5 years, the entire 5 years we were together, were they all fake? Was there really not even a trace of anything real? Not even the slightest bit worth your nostalgia? This was the first time she had ever stood before me, having completely stripped away all posture, pride, and pretense, exposing the most primitive, lost, and helpless truth within her. I looked at her quietly, at this woman I had once loved to the bone, for whom I had given everything, yet who could no longer stir even the faintest ripple in my heart. There was no hatred in my eyes, no resentment, not even sarcasm, only the calm clarity of someone who had weathered countless storms and seen through the world, as though I were examining a past that no longer concerned me. It was real, I said slowly, my voice steady, as if I were recounting someone else's story, devoid of any emotional fluctuation. Those 5 years, everything you did for me, every kindness you showed me, the food you took me to eat, the gifts you gave me, even the protection and care you believed yourself to be offering, were all real. A faint, fragile glimmer of hope instantly ignited in Willow's eyes, almost like a plea. She took a hurried half-step forward, as if clutching at the very last lifeline. But my next words were like the sharpest awl, tempered by ice over countless years, precise, merciless, and utterly unforgiving, shattering every pitiful illusion that had just begun to form. But Willow, do you still not understand? My gaze was clear as a mirror, reflecting her face as it froze instantly, drained of all color. In those 5 years, you weren't loving me. You were loving, through me, the shadow of Makoto, the one you could never obtain in your youth, the one you could never let go of. You projected onto me everything you had wanted to do for him but never got the chance to do, every bit of tenderness, patience, care, romance, even that regret-laced, self-indulgent desire to give and sacrifice, magnified and poured entirely onto me. And I paused slightly here, the corner of my lips lifting ever so faintly, almost imperceptibly, with a trace of self-mockery. Was the fool who only realized at the very last moment, after reality had slapped him in the face again and again, that he was nothing more than a pitiful substitute. Boom. Those words were like the final strike of a judge's gavel, carrying thunderous, annihilating force as they crashed down upon Willow's head. In an instant, they shattered every shell of self-deception she had built, ripping open the truth she had always feared to face and desperately tried to bury, laying it bloody and exposed under the harsh light of day. No, that's not true, it can't be. She instinctively tried to refute it, to deny it loudly, her lips trembling, but not a single clear syllable could escape her. Yet the fragments of memory she had deliberately ignored and forcibly suppressed now surged uncontrollably into her mind, vivid, merciless, and cruelly linking themselves together. Why was it that when she first met George, she had been so proactive, so eager in pursuing him? Was it because from a certain angle, in a certain expression, he faintly resembled that unattainable figure buried deep in her memories? Why was it that she clearly didn't like sweets, yet after casually hearing that Makoto had loved a particular old-fashioned dessert shop back in high school, she went out of her way to cross half the city just to buy them for George? At that moment, was she satisfied by George's smile, or by the illusion that she had finally filled in some long-standing regret of her own? Why was it that she was allergic to shrimp, yet subconsciously remembered that he loved eating them? And later, after Makoto appeared, she could even make an exception for him, enduring the discomfort to peel shrimp for him. What had she been thinking then, about the treatment George had never received, or about finally having done this thing for him in her memories? Why, when George asked about her past relationships, had she described that unfulfilled crush so vividly, almost with a faint, unconscious wistfulness, as if every detail were etched into her bones? That wasn't honesty. That was repeatedly chewing over and reliving regret, by telling it to her current partner. So that was it. That so-called deep affection she prided herself on. That inexplicable, lingering attachment to Makoto that had even fooled herself, and her repeated, unconscious favoritism toward him. None of it had ever been some unforgettable, bone-deep love. It had merely been a pathological fixation on youthful regret, an obsession born of wanting what she could never have, of something forever feeling unfinished, and what she had truly grown used to, depended on, immersed herself in, and even absorbed into her very bones without realizing it, was the warmth, the tacit understanding, the sense of security, and those trivial yet genuine, everyday moments of happiness that George, the real, living person, had given her over those 5 years. She hadn't been torn painfully between a long-cherished crush and her current boyfriend. She had already fallen in love with George, the man who stayed by her side day after day, giving her real warmth, yet she had been utterly blind to it. Instead, she had used every foolish and cruel method imaginable to hurt him, to push him away, all to worship and preserve that long-since hollow, self-beautified illusion of youthful obsession. A massive, belated, tsunami-like wave of regret and terror crashed down on Willow in an instant, completely swallowing her whole. Her limbs turned icy cold, her entire body trembled violently. Beyond her control, she could barely remain standing, only managing to cling uselessly to the cold wall for support. No, that's not it. George, that's not how it is. She suddenly stepped forward, her emotions utterly spiraling out of control, trying to grab my hand. Her voice was filled with an unprecedented, total panic and despair, her words tumbling out incoherently. I love you. I know it clearly now, absolutely, unmistakably. The one I love is you. It's always been you. It has nothing to do with anyone else. I was stupid. I was blind. I let my heart be clouded. Give me one more chance. Just one. Please. I'm begging you. Her eyes were bloodshot, her posture so low it was almost as if she were about to kneel, sinking into the dust. I looked at her reddened eyes, at the genuine, overwhelming pain and pleading within them. Yet my heart felt no ripple at all, only a calm that came after the dust had finally settled. Gently, yet with absolute firmness and an unquestionable resolve, I withdrew my hand. I shook my head. My tone remained calm, but it carried a decisive finality, pronouncing the ultimate verdict. Willow, your love came too late. And after you chose him again and again, after you abandoned me and hurt me for the sake of that ridiculous obsession, this kind of love is also far too cheap for me. I can't afford it, and I don't want it anymore." With that, I no longer looked at the instant collapse and utter despair on her face. As if her world were crumbling apart, I turned away resolutely, my footsteps steady and firm, walking toward the brilliantly lit, glorious awards stage that belonged to me, and I never looked back. Chapter 22. At the awards ceremony, the spotlight shone like a brilliant river of stars, holding the heavy trophy that symbolized the highest honor. I faced cameras from around the world. My acceptance speech was calm yet powerful. My gaze swept across the guests below, never lingering on any one place, including the woman seated in the deepest corner of shadow. "Thank you to the committee for granting me this honor. This is not merely an affirmation of me as an individual, but a tribute to all journalists who stand on the front line of truth, undeterred by danger. A period of past experience has made me profoundly realize that the value of life never depends on any single relationship. An independent spirit, professional integrity, the courage to face hardship, and the belief in always speaking for truth and the vulnerable, these are the stars and seas worth pursuing with our entire lives." Throughout the speech, I never mentioned the woman sitting in the shadows below, not once. Yet every word, every sentence, served as the final annotation of farewell, clearly telling her, "Your world, I have completely left behind. My world has long since become vast and free, with no further ties to you." Willow sat in the most inconspicuous corner of the audience, hidden in shadow, watching George stand at the pinnacle of the world, radiant under the lights, receiving applause and respect, listening to his calm yet forceful words, each one sounding like a final goodbye directed at her. She finally, utterly, without the slightest illusion, understood. She had lost him, forever, completely. She had lost the boy who had once loved her with his entire, most sincere heart, only to be slowly destroyed, pushed away by her own hands, and who had ultimately grown into someone so dazzling and extraordinary. Before her eyes, the world seemed to lose all color and sound in an instant, leaving only boundless, deathly grayness and cold, swallowing her whole. A few years later, late one night, Willow stood alone before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her empty, icy penthouse apartment, immaculate and lifeless like an expensive showroom. Outside lay the city's dazzling prosperity, brilliant yet devoid of warmth, unable to shine into the room. On the massive LCD screen, an international news channel played silently. On screen, George appeared on scorched ground where the flames of war had only just died down. Embers still warm, he stood calmly before the ruins, delivering a live report. Even without sound, the composure, strength, and quiet compassion he carried seemed to pierce through the screen. In her hand, she held a glass of strong liquor. The amber liquid swirled gently, yet she did not drink. Her fingers lifted unconsciously, tracing, through the cold, smooth surface of the screen, his brows and eyes, his features, his lips, again and again, with extreme gentleness. In her eyes was a depth of despair so thick it could drown her. And love, a love that had come too late, too painful, too hopeless. After a long while, she tilted her head back and drained the glass in one gulp. The burning liquid scorched her throat and stomach like fire, yet it did nothing to suppress the barren, icy emptiness and pain hollowing out her chest. Staring at the men on the screen, someone she could no longer touch, no longer chase back, she murmured softly. Her voice was hoarse and broken, like a dreamlike whisper, carrying eternal regret. "I think I've only just learned how to love, but you no longer need it." Outside the window, the city's brilliant yet icy light silently reflected her figure, forever frozen in remorse and solitude, long and wordless.